After graduating from the City University of New York with a master's in psychology, Joe Zito decided to get into filmmaking. In 1975, he directed Abduction, which was loosely based on the Patty Hearst kidnappings by the Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA. He wrote and produced the horror film Blood Rage under the pseudonym Joseph Bigwood. He was trying to get his next film off the ground when he was called to a producer's office to read the script for a different movie they wanted him to direct. The script was written by Glenn Leopold and Neil Barbera, son of Joseph Barbera of Hanna-Barbera. Both had been writing shows for Hanna-Barbera, like Scooby-Doo and Shmoo, but were looking to do something more mature. The script was about a couple murdered in 1945 by a mysterious man in army fatigues. 35 years later, at a school dance, the killings began again. That script was what would become The Prowler. The movie was given a budget of about $1 million, which was still comparatively small, but was the largest budget Zito had ever worked with up to that point. Even still, this was a lower budgeted production, so Zito cast mostly young, unknown actors from New York and LA. While casting, Zito found out a producer's wife was in an acting class with classic actor Farley Granger. Granger was best known for his role as Guy Haynes in Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. The next thing Zito knew, Granger had been hired to star in the production. They also managed to hire classic actor Lawrence Tierney to play Major Chatham. Filming began in Cape May, New Jersey, in the fall, the off-season. Being the off-season, Zito said there was no one around, and the folks who were there were odd. The opening news footage was actual stock footage taken from World War II. The announcer for the audio used to do voice work for these back during the war. The production team managed to track him down. He was in his 80s, but was more than happy to do the audio for them. The opening takes place in 1945. They couldn't afford to have the costume department make period-appropriate clothes, so they lucked out when they found a warehouse full of outfits from 1953. They looked at the styles from the time, and they were close enough. They also couldn't afford to rent the classic cars, but were lucky enough to find a collector that loaned them all the cars for the beginning. The extras for the opening attended dance classes in order to learn how to do the big ballroom dances like the 1940s. The actor who played the killer and the person who wore the Prowler's military outfit were two different people. Peter Giuliano, the first assistant director, said this was the stupidest decision the director made because he cast him as the Prowler. So he'd be in full military garb telling everyone what to do, and then get into character to murder them. While working on the film, they were missing one very important element. They had no one handling the special makeup effects. Zito called up Tom Savini, who was just finishing work on Maniac. He agreed, and a few days later was on set working on the effects. Now with Savini on board, they built a schedule around the effects shots. The film had no stunt people. The actors did their own stunts, and Savini did many of the stunts as the Prowler. Whenever you see the Prowler killing someone, it's usually Savini wearing the outfit, or part of the outfit. Savini had a life cast made of the actor's head so he could drive a bayonet into it. Inside the head was a condom filled with fake blood. For the girl getting impaled in the shower, the pitchfork was cut down, and they had a plate welded to the front of it so it couldn't hurt the actress. They hollowed out the points and ran tubing inside to spray blood out of the wound. When Lisa gets kicked into the pool, the leg is a rubber leg and boot worn on the arm of Savini. It took 18 times to get it right. Since they were filming in October, the water was freezing. The movie was shot in real locations with no sets. The Major's house was a museum they were allowed to film in. The only reason they were allowed to do so was because the curators were fans of Lawrence Tierney, and they were honored to have him filming there. The fireplace was a facade, so they'd have an easier time dropping the corpse of Rosemary into the frame. Even still, they never quite got the drop exactly as the director wanted it. They filmed in a real cemetery on Halloween night. It wasn't intentional, the shooting schedule just ended up this way. For the grand finale, the Prowler takes a shotgun blast to the head. Savini took a life cast of the actor and filled the insides of the fake head with apple cores, condoms filled with blood, and bits of the day's leftover lunch. He fired the shotgun himself, and they slowed the footage down in post to show the gore. Filming took roughly 30 days. Now that the movie was finished, they searched for a distributor. They got an offer from Avco Embassy, who handled some of John Carpenter's films. Zito was excited because not only would they be able to open the film in 1,000+ theaters, but by being with Avco Embassy, it would make the film appear as a classier horror film, even though it wasn't. The problem was they only offered $700,000 for the distribution rights. Since the film cost closer to $1 million, it meant the producer would have to take a hit on the initial release, in the hopes the film would do well enough, and he could recoup that money on the back end. He didn't want to take the chance, so the offer was declined. The producer decided to handle the distribution himself through sub-distributors. He arranged to have the film run in theaters in one region for a few weeks, and then move to another for a few weeks, and so on. The movie got out there, but because of this distribution, it didn't generate much buzz, and not a lot of people saw it. International distribution was a different story. The film was picked up by Carolco and did way better outside the US, although they changed the title to Rosemary's Killer. While the film was out in the US, Zito got a call from one of the owners of the Friday the 13th series. He told him he saw the film and loved it, but it wasn't going to make any money. He said if he slapped the Friday the 13th name on it, it would make a fortune. They just finished Friday the 13th Part 3, and he told Zito when they got to Part 4, they'd hire him to direct. Zito thought it was nice, but just assumed it was a Hollywood BS call, and he'd never actually get the job. Months later, he got the call and was hired to direct Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Zito brought Savini back to work on the film. Savini was happy to work on the film since he did the FX for the original. Zito followed Friday the 13th, the final chapter, up with the Chuck Norris vehicle Missing in Action, which was a huge hit in theaters and on home video. It was one of Cannon's most successful films, and spawned both a prequel and a sequel. With this being such a hit, Zito was hired to direct Invasion USA, Red Scorpion, and became better known as an action director. The Prowler was released on VHS, but became a forgotten film. The movie didn't get a DVD release until 2002, and that almost didn't happen. Zito was embarrassed by two things in the movie and was considering just burying the film. The first was he hated Rosemary's fake tombstone, and the second was he hated the picture of Rosemary in the book. They couldn't afford to have a book made, so they just glued her picture inside the book, and Zito couldn't stand it. Thankfully, he did get over it, and the film made its way to DVD and later Blu-ray. The Prowler is a great, very overlooked slasher. It's got a unique villain, solid directing, and some amazing visual effects. Tom Savini considers The Prowler to be his best work. It's a nasty little film that shows you how to do effective horror without a gigantic budget. By comparison, something like the Prom Night remake cost $20 million and was awful. No blood, no scares, no soul. Even adjusting for inflation, The Prowler would only have cost around $2.2 million. I'm glad Zito came to his senses and okayed the film to get a DVD release. It's a great slasher, and much like the antagonist of the film, is back from out of nowhere decades later.
Want a slug?
You sure know how to put a girl in the mood.